Hello and welcome to 315 Voices. I'm your host, Greg Scott. 1 Peter 3:15 reminds us to always be prepared to give an account when someone asks for the reason for the hope that's within us. And today's guest is Drew Maddux. Drew is currently the Vice President for People Development for Ashley Global, the parent company for Ashley Furniture. But you might know him as a highly successful high school basketball coach in Nashville, an SEC basketball player at Vanderbilt University, or for one of his many trick shots that went viral on YouTube or on social media. But today, if you're looking for a few minutes to be inspired and get practical ways to live your life on mission each day, then I'm so glad you've joined us, and I know you're going to enjoy our conversation with Drew Maddux. Drew, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hey Greg, it's great to be with you. I'm honored. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you, and excited to see what you're doing with the platform, with this podcast, and the blessing that you are, and the encouragement that you are to so many people. Anybody that hears your words, your interviews, your conversations, I know they're going to be extremely blessed, and I'm excited to be here with you today.
Well, the honor feeling is mutual to have you on here. People in Tennessee know you, and people outside of Tennessee know you from a long career in basketball, both as a player, then as a coach, and we're going to get into some of that today, Drew. But think back just real quick for some background. Where did your faith story kind of begin? Go back to young Drew.
Yeah, extremely blessed. I don't use the word lucky. I was extremely blessed to be the son of Ray and Anita Maddux, and faith was the cornerstone. Our belief in Jesus Christ was the foundation by which everything that existed within our house, that's the way it flowed. And my family made faith real. It wasn't just in words, it wasn't in intellect, it was with actions and service. And the way that my parents, I watched them exemplify the hands and feet of Jesus in our church and in our community. And it just became so real to me that we were very involved in our church, Hendersonville First Baptist Church. I grew up right here in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and an incredible church with people that made a big investment in me, young little Drew. Whether it was through Sunday school or through Vacation Bible School or whatever was going on at the church, we were very involved. And I still remember at the age of 12, I was in sixth grade. And I remember it may have been, Greg, on about the seventh stanza of Just As I Am. And they were running it back one more time. And I was white knuckling the pew in front of me to accept the invitation to accept Jesus. But I did walk down front, said that I wanted to accept Christ as my Savior. I was baptized later on that night. I would say that was really the beginning of my faith journey because, you know, as life and as your journey and as your story evolves and as the world becomes very, very prominent in your story, I would say that I wavered in my faith. I wavered in my uncertainty and my belief. And I would say that it was really my true moment of when I had a real encounter with the living God, when I fully submitted my life over to him was October the 5th, 2000, in a hospital room when my daughter Emma was born. I became a father that day at 11:38 a.m. And I remember her asleep in her crib. My wife was asleep in the hospital bed. And it was in that moment that I truly felt like the voice of God was speaking directly to me. And when I fully submitted my life to Christ that day at Baptist Hospital on October the 5th, 2000.
The only way that the seventh stanza works is if you skip third, fourth, and fifth. You see, or you don't.
Yeah.
Those that grew up in small Baptist churches like you and I will recognize. I don't know who wrote those verses or stanzas, right, but we don't use them.
Yeah.
Drew, it's funny that you mentioned that. I think back to you came out of Vanderbilt University, SEC basketball player there, and you go straight into corporate America with a job climbing the corporate ladder. You mentioned that moment where God got a hold of you in that hospital room in 2000. I read a quote from you when you started your journey in coaching and left corporate America, and your quote was, "I was winning at work, but I was losing at home." So how do those two life moments coincide with one another?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. This has been the great wrestling match of my life, and I think many men can relate to this. That at an early age, that identity driven approach that performance provided is really what filled your heart. And so, whether it was on a basketball court or whether it was through popularity or through status or whatever was going on, the new normal became that chasing success in business or through accolades or achievement or making money or getting the next commission check or whatever it was, that became the next identity piece that would fill my heart. And what I came to find out, Greg, was that I was achieving a lot at work. I was doing things well beyond my years. I was in rooms and a part of transactions that, somebody my age, 24, 25 years old, was really fortunate to be a part of. But what I found out was that in the chasing of that success, it never fulfilled the hole that was in my heart, that only Jesus could fill that. So when you read that quote or you hear that quote, that's actually tied to when I left corporate America and went into coaching at Christ Presbyterian Academy, because it was like running parallel to this submission to this life that I wanted as a father, as a husband, a great work-life integration. I was missing that through the chasing of the corporate accolades and achievement. And so with that came a pivot of total lifestyle as well. So through that submission, giving my life over to Christ, also came purpose and a new destiny that was presented before me, which allowed me the fortunate privilege to get to go into coaching and to coach young boys and to help raise them into young men.
And I think I want to unpack that one step farther of how surprised were you that purpose completely replaced achievement, and as far as being a coach, and how long into that did it take?
Yeah, it was pretty quick because I had left. What many people thought I was crazy, including our CEO and others. Our organization had just gone public. I had stock options that were on a vesting schedule over many years. I had been given new opportunities and new leadership. I was rising quickly and rapidly through the corporate ladder. And even to make that switch into education and into coaching and teaching was deemed pretty much like I was crazy. I mean, like, what are you doing? That makes no sense mathematically. It makes no sense to anybody. And I totally trusted God in those years and in those moments and in those experiences that He would provide. Because if I was stepping out in faith, if I was stepping and taking that step out of the boat and saying, God, I'm here, allow me to pursue what you have for me, that ultimately it would make your name more and more famous in and through and around everything that I have, that He would provide. And Greg, He provided every step of the way, whether it was through a new partnership with Nike basketball, or whether it was through opportunities to broadcast, or whether it was through other opportunities to speak. Whatever it was things that I was not even planning on, that just lined up after I said yes to what God had for me.
What a lot of men have said over the years, whether you know them personally or it's something that you've read that they've said, it's the purpose supplanted that very easily to the fact that while it looked crazy that you're leaving corporate America,
Yeah.
to you it would look crazy to reverse that and go back to that type of corporate America. And I know you're back in corporate America now, but it's a little different. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But now at CPA, your teams became pretty competitive pretty quickly. You guys were competing for region tournaments and for state tournaments and state championships. And Drew, you may not know this, but the first time you and I were in proximity, I was on the TSSAA board and was at the state tournament, and you'll have to give me the year that you and Haywood tied up in the semifinals. And I've never seen the Murphy Center, by the way, the TSSAA state tournament. For those listening outside the state of Tennessee, we played at the Murphy Center on the campus of Middle Tennessee State University, and it doesn't fill up. It gets close a lot, and before or since then, I've not seen more people by the third and fourth quarter of that game that were in that bowl and were engaged in that ball game. But here's the story I want to tell out of it. I watched that game, and you guys did not win that game. Haywood went on to not only win that game, but the state championship. Super talented team. Jordan
Yes.
Vernado, who went on to play at Troy and was a phenomenal athlete there. Just a good basketball team. So was
Yes.
yours. Braxton went on to Alabama. You had a lot of talent on that team too. But I watched you after a heartbreaking loss. You line up the chairs,
Mm.
pick up the trash, put it back. None of the TWSLA or event staff had to touch your sideline for the next game. And I watched that, and I've seen coaches do that before, and coaches have that mantra, but they don't always do it when they lose a game at that
Right.
level. And that stuck with me. And it's something that you've used, that pick up the trash, that you still use as something that you put out there every day. If you want to talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I believe purpose is uncompromising. Greg, it doesn't matter if we win or lose. It doesn't matter if you're victorious or if you're disappointed. That purpose supersedes all of that. And I also believe that your values should be lived, seen, and felt. And a value to me is something that you're willing to die for or something you're willing to be fired for. And once again, not compartmentalized, not segmented, and always on. And so, regardless if we won or lost the game, I'm so thankful that particular night you saw me make sure that I lived up to what the mission statement of my life is, which is to pick up the trash and leave people, places, and things better than the way you found them. From the great coach Don Meyer, who was at Lipscomb University, is where I first heard that saying. But regardless of wherever we are, whatever the situation is, the circumstance, the situation, the people, the organization, the setting, the place, it does not matter. When your story collides with the story in present moment, when you leave that moment, both the setting or the person and you yourself should leave better for it. And that is living and ultimately breathing life into your purpose. And so, yes, regardless if you're disappointed or regardless if you're elated, it should not matter. It should be uncompromising because your mission, your purpose, and your values are something that always have life and it never dies.
How do you get others to buy into that? And and you're obviously a highly motivated individual,
Yeah.
and you did do that day, and it stuck with me 10 years later. How do you get others to buy into this is just as important a mission as the success we see in our program?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first of all, it's got to be seen and felt. It just cannot be in words. It cannot be one of those situations. We've all been around leaders and coaches and teachers and around people, and I'm sure I still do this. So, forgive me because I'm clearly not perfect in this, but the old adage of do as I say, not as I do, it cannot be that. People see through inauthentic people and ungenuine people all the time. And so I think, first of all, your actions must line up with your words and they got to see it in you. It can't just be coach speak. It has to be something that is seen in the environment every day. And I would hope, even a funny story would be that the players, when I would come in the fourth quarter of the girls' game before we were to take the floor, and you would come in for one more scouting report or one more motivational moment or that last kind of word of encouragement before the players were to go out and warm up and take the floor that night, they would throw little gum wrappers on the floor. And they would see how long it would take for me to even pick them up, even in that moment in time. And so it became something that even became a joke of sorts. It just became like this thing. And so I think it's got to be seen, it's got to be felt, and then you got to speak and you got to celebrate and you got to honor when you see it. When you see mission and vision
That's
and
good.
purpose being lived, you must stop and celebrate and honor it. So if we saw an assistant coach, if we saw a player, it didn't matter who it was, we would stop and pour kerosene on that moment. And you need to do it in those moments. And we just began to see the momentum that was created from that, where it became just part of the fabric of the DNA of what the program was, that we were there to exist, to make sure that we led with everything that we were, whether we were a player, assistant coach, or head coach. We were there to hopefully lead to the elevation and increase of others, period. That's all we were there to do.
Well, that's good. And something that I recognize as a flaw in my own character as a leader is I just expect you to do what you're supposed to do, and I don't always stop. And that's a great phrase, pour kerosene on that moment or recognize you because that's what you were supposed to do. And,
Yeah.
we were brought up as you don't get pats on the back for meeting expectations. And but boy, what a great point of if I want to encourage that lifestyle and that mission, not just encourage it, but foster it and make
Yes.
sure that it grows. I've got to pour something into it. Boy, it's a great
No.
point. I'm glad you made that.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I think that's something I've wanted to make sure that we have within our Ashley family as well. Is we want to be a culture of celebration and honor, whether it's through even the way that we start meetings, or the way that you end meetings, or when you go into a store, you go into a distribution center, you go into a call center. It should not matter when you see mission, purpose, and values being lived out. Stop, celebrate, speak a word of life. Words have power. Affirmation and encouragement are now studies will show are as equally as important as bonus checks and commission checks. Like what it does for a person in terms of the psychology of the brain, the well-being genes, and the things that shoot off throughout your body. It is equal as receiving a check placed in your hand. And so let's be people that want to celebrate and love others big.
One last topic before we get off of CPA and your coaching career there was you had a no cut policy. I know the coaches that are going to tune into this podcast and listen to you today are that's going to make them hit the brakes. That you had a policy there at CPA as a head coach of the basketball program that you won't cut any athlete that wanted to be a part of your program. So talk about that for a little bit. How was that ever difficult to keep into place? Was there ever a time you looked around and went, this might not have been a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely, you have those days when that would occur, But it was something I remember reading Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks, and I know you've read it, Greg, and it's been a big part
That's
of
a
your
great book.
story
Great book.
about Joe Ehrman and what he was doing at the Gilman School in Baltimore, Maryland, and it became, such a big part of my coaching philosophy. And I remember reading in that book where they, had a no cut policy. And I said, and at the time I wasn't even a coach, but I said, if I was ever a coach, I was even in basketball with the constraints of a gymnasium and goals and resources and assistant. I was going to have an all comers policy. Like if you wanted to be a part of what we were doing, you're in. And certainly there were days where that was a challenge. But I'll tell you what it did for me. It made me such a better coach. It made me so much more purposeful, so much more intentional. Because when you script out, and I still have every single practice plan I ever did at CPA in 15 years. I could go to the garage. They're still lined up in year order, sequenced by date and sequenced by number, down to the time, what was going on. And Greg, what would happen was every single assistant coach and every single player was accounted for every single minute of every practice we ever did. And there was never any standing around. And so there was all these groups. And if there was a scrimmage group, there were still activities going on the outside margin of the court where kids were still having to be productive and coaches were still instructing. And I would make assistant coaches CEOs of different segments of practice. And it made me such a more intentional coach because I had to think through every single player, even the last freshman on the team, number 35, number 34, whatever it was, all the way up to, you mentioned Braxton, who was a Mr. Basketball. What are we doing today to make sure we're connecting and leading to the elevation and increase through the game of basketball and speaking life into them? And it just made me a better coach. And so I would challenge any coach. Obviously, you can't have 100 kids in a gym. I get that. I mean, we were a smaller school, so it worked for us. But I would challenge you to figure out ways that you can even stretch your program to even bless and minister to other people, because sport is the great connector and it's the great platform that you've been entrusted with as a coach. And so who can you serve? Who can you minister to? Who can you mentor? Who can you coach? Who can you educate? Who can you teach? Don't discount the opportunities just because of numbers or because you've never experienced it a certain way that it can't be done.
Yep. That reminds me of the Billy Graham quote about coaches, that a coach will affect more people in a year than most of us will in a lifetime. And that applies directly to that. It's challenged me when I heard that. I'm out of coaching. This is my second year out of coaching. And I went back and go, I think I want to do that. I think if I get back into coaching. And baseball's a little easier because we're outdoors most of the time and we can just spread them out. But you must have spent 2 to 3 times the amount of time on your preparation for practice as you actually did in the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've all heard the adage of mental is two or three or four times that it is to physical. And so to your point, the preparation for excellence and the expectation of excellence while we're actually in practice have to coincide. It has to be the same. I can't just wing it. I'm not just going to write it on a napkin. I'm certainly not going to show up in a gym and not have a practice plan. And I've seen many coaches do that. But what it allowed us to do too, Greg, was have some incredible conversations over the years. I'll never forget, and I don't mean to indict him on this, but I'll tell you a story about John Calipari walking into our gym. And John Calipari was recruiting two of our young men in those years that you mentioned. And he walked in, and there was other coaches there that particular day. And once again, here came our team out to the court. And they're starting to warm up. And I'm just having a conversation with them after school as we're about to get ready to practice. And he said, Drew, why is the middle school in here to practice with the high school? Like, I don't understand that those guys look so small. And they did. They were little freshmen at the time. And so what it allowed me to do is be able to talk about the parable of the talents, whether you were given five, two, or one. Our program was built on that everybody has something to offer. I talked about the no cut policy. I talked about our program's approach of trying to build Christ centered, others focused young men taken from Mark 12, 30, 31. So it allowed these on ramps to these incredible conversations, even with the biggest names in the world of basketball. And they would walk away feeling encouraged and blessed that it can be done a different way.
Yeah, I'm sure your locker room for practice kind of looked like a clown car. They just kept coming
What? On
in
top of each
droves.
other. I'll tell you though, the other thing that was, and this goes back to a couple of questions ago that you asked about, like, how does that start to really happen and how does that manifest? And one of the amazing things that we did, and I know our football program does this, and Randy Heron has had a big part of this in our football program and in my years with partner alongside of me in basketball. But the way that we taught our young men to tell their story, we used shields, and we would split it into fourths, and you would draw these characters so it allowed somebody to articulate their story well, what we would do, Greg, is every single coach, including myself, every single year, and every single player, whether you were the oldest senior or the youngest freshman, it didn't matter who you were given the opportunity to tell your story because we believe everyone matters and everybody has something to contribute and to make an impact. And what it started to do was, to your point, make the locker room a safe place. We've all been in locker rooms where there's been a lot of wounding or a lot of trauma, maybe even, or a lot of hurt. And what I wanted was to have a place that it was a safe place where you could come and be your truest self. You didn't have to perform for identity. You didn't have to create some ideal. You certainly didn't have to live in the shadows. You could be your true self and you were accepted for who you were in that locker room. And through the telling of stories, that's the way that it started to really align to the purpose, the mission, and the values of what the program was about.
If you can get a locker room to be a place that everybody from the youngest freshman with the least amount of career playing time can be in there with SEC athletes and they're both great with it and they both want to be there, then all of a sudden I'm a pretty smart coach when it comes to X's and O's because everything works.
That's right. Well, and I've always believed this. If you ever want to know the true essence of what you're doing as a leader of an organization, go to the lowest common denominator as measured by X, whether it's through performance, whether it's through production, whether it is. Ask them about their experience. And once again, no place is perfect. Lord knows we made so many mistakes over the years. Drew Maddux made so many mistakes. So I'm not sitting here with trying to pretend that the narrative is not that of mistake making as well. But I will tell you, we tried really hard and we sprinted very intensely to create a space where everybody belonged and everybody mattered.
That's good stuff. So we'll make one more pivot for you career wise. You did leave CPA. Just as surprising to people that you left your corporate job to be a high school basketball coach. You kind of sent some shockwaves through Tennessee high school basketball by an abrupt exit into what you are now, which is the executive vice president of people development for Ashley Global. You recognize that, Ashley Furniture being one of the arms of that.
Yes.
But how did that come to fruition, and how did you say yes to that?
Yeah, I do believe this, and Mark Batterson is one of my favorite authors of National Community Church, and wrote so many great books, but his latest book is a great title. And it talks about the difference between suddenly and gradually. And yes, to your point, it looked on the surface that it was a sudden, abrupt change, but really that was the process of what God was doing in and through my heart, my soul, going back many years. And I learned very early the power of your yes. I talked about leaving corporate America to go to coach basketball, but the very first time that I understood the power of a yes and what's on the other side of it was walking into a gymnasium in East Nashville at Lytton Middle School for an AAU tryout when I was in sixth grade. And I get put on a basketball team with one of my best friends in life all these years later, a guy named Ron Mercer. And it was a risk for me to step out of my comfort, to step into that environment. And I said yes to it, even at 12, 13 years old. And then I learned it through CPA and all that God did through that. And he was just preparing me for something that was elevated. I mean, that he had this divine opportunity that was just set up for me, and all the gradual approach, all the process, all the days, all the lessons, all the stories, all the experiences, all of that was being created for this sudden change of environments. And so, yes, it probably looked like, once again, a sudden and abrupt change, but it was many years of a process of what God was doing in, through, and around my story to get me ready for that moment, to even be able to say yes, to be a part of an executive team of one of the largest corporations in all of America.
Our audience got to hear from Chuck Box, my friend at University of Texas, and how kind of the same story of him moving into college athletics after being a longtime high school coach and what that looked like in his life. And I told him, I said, man, you got kind of a dream job. If you ask what his not his job title, but what his role is, job description is to try to make the person in front of me the best version of themselves, whoever that is on our team that day. And I said, man, what a great job. And then I told him, I said, but let me tell you about my friend Drew. He's got this. He's got another great job. So talk about your role there. You hinted to it earlier, how you're gonna you want to become a corporation of encouragers, and the culture there is super important, not only to you, but it's obviously important to Ashley Global for bringing you on in that role.
Yeah, I first of all want to say, with deep gratitude, uh, just how amazing he is, that our CEO, Chad Spencer, one of my best friends, just his heartbeat for people, that people is definitely, and it's not just speak, is placed above profits, that people are the very most important thing to him, whether it's our team members, the guests we serve, or through a purpose-driven approach to the communities that we're blessed to live, work, and play in. And we want to make a difference. And so what he saw was he needed somebody to wake up, and when their 2 feet hit the ground, that they go after the heart and souls of people. That first of all, we want to have an inside-out approach, that we want to serve, encourage, and bless our own team members as they go out, and as we get in the multiplication game, they're able to bless and serve our guests and the communities that we serve. And so we do that a couple of different ways. Through my opportunity, it's through leadership, culture, and people development. And so let's just kind of unpack all of that. Leadership development obviously is a multi-purposed approach in the way that we serve our leaders. And so whether that's through continuous education, whether it's through coaching, whether it's through life and growth planning, we have a pretty sophisticated learning system as well that really blesses our leaders. We have a cultural development platform. We do that through our town halls, our meetings, our broadcasts. We have productions that we're fortunate to do each and every month as a way to serve, our entire organization. And then through our people development, regardless of who you are, what your position is, once again, it's the parable of the talent. So we're wanting to bless and connect with where you are and what you need. And so we have all sorts of programs, all sorts of opportunities for anybody in our organization to be able to experience growth and development. But Greg, I'll tell you, I've never seen an organization be more intentional. I'll say, organizations like Chick-fil-A and others, Southwest Airlines, because I've studied them, that do more and try to be more for its people as Ashley Global Retail.
And you can hear it not only in what you say, but how you say it, that it's they hired the right guy. I mean, this is something that's in your heart for people as well, where you just get to pour into people and then watch the results of that and how God uses your gifting to do that. And that's got to be just that sense of purpose has to be super fulfilling.
Well, and I believe this, and certainly we bring this to the organization, but uh, every single person is a coach. And the original definition of a coach, if you go back to the 1500s, is a transportation device usually drawn by horses, somewhat of importance from point A to point B. And so what I believe and what we teach is that every single human being has two gaps that exist. Number one, they have the potential gap, who they are today and who they're becoming. And what we're trying to do is to make sure we're bridging the gap of helping them on this journey of becoming and maximizing all that they were created to be. But it can't just stop there, because that would be a life that chases success. And once again, we want to be a life that is built on changing the paradigm and making sure that I consider the needs of others and chasing significance. And so I have to consider the second gap, which is the impact gap. So as I become more aware of my gifts and abilities and maximizing my potential, the paradigm and the lens by which I see the world, I start to understand the needs around me and the impact that divinely I was created to make with my special design, my special strengths, my special gifts. Well, a coach helps somebody in understanding those two gaps and helping them connect those places of interest. And so that's what I wake up and do every day, whether I'm doing it through the masses or whether it's one person in front of me. That's all we're trying to do is, how do I help somebody maximize their potential in order to make the impact they were created to make.
Hey, stop by Kingdom and Country Apparel online today at kingdomandcountry.co. Mark and Jen are believers and veterans, and they encourage us to wear their gear, like the t-shirt I have on today, with courage, live it with purpose, and never stop sharing the good news. Use my coupon code 315VOICES associated with this podcast and grab your discount when you log on today. That's kingdomandcountry.co. And speaking of impact, personal life with you and your family, talk about. I don't want to miss this in our time, and there's a lot of things to unpack off what you just said. So I hope we can come back to that another day, and maybe have you back on another time, because I'd love to go deeper into that. But you and your family adopted two boys from Uganda. Yep. I say two little boys, but they're not so little anymore, because that's been several years ago. But man, of course, you know that my wife and I, adoption is near and dear to our heart as well, with our youngest son, Kane. But talk about that and how you got to that point where you went, yes, this is exactly what God's designed for our family.
Yeah, another example of the power of yes. It just took a long time to get there in this particular situation. But Greg, we just through the way that God orchestrates different relationships in your life, it just became so apparent to us through different relationships that we had that God had more for our family, whether it was through ministries that we were serving, whether it was through opportunities to go serve different parts of the world, whether it was partnering alongside different organizations that we believed in. There was so much in this space of those that were less fortunate. And we just knew there was more. And at the time, my wife and I had three biological daughters. And through a series of events, became very much connected to what adoption means and the opportunity to adopt and all that God can do in and through that. Several of our mentors and family, friends and heroes had stepped into that arena, and we were so blessed by their journey and thought, hey, maybe that's for us as well. And so we had that going on. And then there was a lady named Katie Davis that was from our area here in Brentwood, Tennessee. She was a young lady, graduated high school. Instead of going to college, she went and served in Jinji, Uganda, and she started to build a ministry there. And so through the connection of these adoption stories with people here locally, and through what she was doing there in Jinji, Uganda, God just shined a big spotlight on adoption in Uganda and what he had for the Maddux family and how that was to intersect. My wife and my daughters were much more ready to adopt than I was, and but they were patient with that, and they were so gracious in that, and allowed me to really explore what God had for me in that. And but we said yes, and I'll never forget. traveling over to Uganda, meeting our boys for the first time, and then bringing them home December 15th, 2010, that we landed back in the United States with our two sons, Patrick and Nicholas.
And there's you hear the stories, and we're going to say this together, and people are going to say, I've heard this before, and there's just no description of how the first time that we adopted our son, and I held him when he was an hour old. There was never been a difference. If you're out there and you're thinking adoption or you're even considering it, there's no difference in a biological son or daughter and an adopted son or daughter. And I just think what a wonderful picture of what Christ did for us.
Amen. Amen. And I'll even throw into to that as well. Like, even if you feel called to step into the world of foster care as well, like, there is a place and a seat at the table for everyone to jump in. The need is so big. And I just think it's an incredible opportunity, whether it's your family extending through foster or through adoption, or whether you partner alongside organizations. I just would say this, that God calls us all as believers to say yes. Now, whatever that looks like for you and however you step into that, for us, it was two boys. But I will tell you, there's around, just call it this, 150 million orphans around the world that have no moms or dads. And you can get caught up in that number. That's a pretty big number. And you can say, man, what difference can I make? Well, what we decided was the ocean is made up of drops of water. And maybe I can't affect the entire body of water, but I can affect two. I can affect two drops of water. And I will never, ever quit proclaiming all that God's done in and through that. That, yes, we gave them a home and a life and a family. But Greg, I know you would express as well, it's been 10x what's been done in and through and what I've learned from them as well.
And sometimes we do get caught up in numbers, but numbers also, my wife says all the time, numbers do paint a picture. Mm-hmm. And if we can take the numbers of adoptable children, and we put them into their own country, be the 10th largest country on the planet currently. And so the need is great. I know that there's somebody listening to this that maybe you're praying through that right now, and I encourage you to say yes. And once you take the step, there was never a moment of regret. I didn't say it was all super easy, and that it was just laid out in front of you financially and logistically, and the challenges that come from all of that, depending on the age of the child. But man, it sure was worth it. So I didn't want to miss your story in that. And your boys are juniors in high school?
They're juniors. Yeah, juniors in high school. They were not. We get asked a lot. They were not biologically related. We just felt called to adopt two from Amani Baby Cottage. Nicholas, who's the younger of our two, slept on a trundle bed beneath Patrick's bed in the same room. And they were just like an old married couple. They just did everything together. And it was meant from the beginning of time that they were to be brothers forever, and to be together.
Yep. Listen, I want to honor our time together, and I'm certainly thankful for you that you got to get on here with us. One of the things that all of our guests do is a 315 challenge, and it's not so challenging, but it's fun to listen to. The 3 in the 315 is give me 3 books, and you've referenced a couple of books already, and one of them may make your list, that outside of the Bible have been impactful to you.
Yeah. Well, I would say Season of Life is number one. I mean, I thought that book, God really used that book and the studying of that book to change the trajectory of my life, which was to leave corporate America, read the story of Joe Ehrman, and to step into high school basketball coaching. So I'll say that was number one. I would say number two, I loved going back to really studying purpose. I mean, this is an old one, but A Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. I thought that was a book. It was a 40-day study. It was an easy read, and you could dive into it. And it was the first time that in my early 20s, I started to really study that there was a greater purpose for my story and a greater purpose to use my gifts to serve the needs of others around me. So I'd say those two. And then I would say, it's such a good question. I'd say number 3 maybe would be my latest book that I just wrote called Get To. And it's a short read. It would take somebody 30 minutes. But the significance of that book that I wrote is actually a conversation between my grandfather, who has now passed away. Cancer took his life, but it was a conversation between he and I of understanding what it means to have a life of gratitude and a get to mindset. It changed my life as well. And it's something that I utter to myself every single day when I wake up. So two first words I say to myself is get to. So I'll throw that one in there as well.
Yeah, that's not shameless at all, but we'll. Uh, I am glad that you brought that up. You mentioned get to. I'm looking forward. I actually haven't had a chance to read that one yet, but I'm looking forward to just the premise behind it of walking into whether it's your job or a task or just your day, like you said, when you put your feet on the floor. Not the things that I have to do today, but it's the things that God's blessed me with. These are the tasks I get to do today.
That's right.
So I'm looking forward to that one for sure. But you also had a book and then a podcast that came with that. Talk about that for just a second. It was Elevated. It was several years ago, but what was the thoughts behind Elevated?
Yeah, so I had a co-author named Virgil Herring and did a podcast just like this, Greg, and realized we were so like-minded, like-hearted, and we thought that we had stories that needed to be told together in terms of blessing and encouraging people. And so what we did was we wrote the book Elevated. We agreed on 50 words that we believed the greats had in common. And we said we were going to spend the next 50 days and just take one word a day and just journal from our perspective what that word means, and then launched into having a podcast together, which was a blessing. We wrote a book called Excavated during COVID that followed that book under the same premise, 50 words. I also wrote a fourth book last year with my daughter Ava, which was a study of Psalms 23 that I would highly encourage people. I think you'll be blessed by the writing of a father and a daughter doing something together, which was a blessing as well.
Psalms 23 is one of those thunder power
Yeah.
sections, as the entire scripture is, but really one to unpack. So the one in the 315 challenge, and you've mentioned a couple of people already that may qualify here, but if you grabbed your phone and I said, who's the most famous person in your phone, that would answer you. Not that I picked up their number and just to impress people, I show you that it's in there. But they'd answer you. They'd answer a text or they'd call you back or they might even pick up on the first ring. Who would
Yeah.
that be for you?
Guys, it's probably going to be in the world of basketball. I'll stay outside of my music friends. But I would say either John Calipari, Billy Donovan, or Rick Pitino. Those would be the three that come to mind quickly that we still text, often and still connect quite frequently.
Right. And when the Lord connects us again and you come back on the podcast somewhere down the road, we're going to hear some Ron Mercer stories as well.
Yes.
I know there's a lot of folks that grew up in the Southeast that watched Ron play for those great Rick Pitino Kentucky teams in the mid-late 90s. And I think back now to going, I think I'd be a pretty good high school coach if I was at Good Pasture or mid-90s and I had Drew Maddux and Ron Mercer suiting up together. So we'll have to come back to that one.
Yeah, you can see the Good Pasture jersey up there on the wall, right there, and picture of Ron and I right behind me over my left shoulder. So that would be its own set of stories that I could tell because, man,
That'd be great.
There's not a place I go in Nashville that people don't talk about those days, and that's been 30 years ago.
I can't imagine because those, and not to get way down the road, people that don't understand, but that private school, public school were in the same classifications in those days. And I can't imagine being from whatever county high school and we show up and who's guarding that guy? I don't know, but I'm not guarding that one either.
Yeah.
And
I tell you, Greg, it was so fun in those years. And once again, I could tell so many stories, but this is pre-social media. This is when the newspaper and TV, was covering high school athletics. And so people fell in love with our story. So the story became bigger than it probably actually was. And people would line up for hours to get into our games. And I still remember like fire marshals and shutting doors and chaining doors and putting brooms in door handles, because they couldn't allow one more person to get in the gym.
You've never played in a half-empty gym, have you?
No, I even in college, I can't even imagine like going to a place or playing at Vanderbilt that it wasn't absolutely packed and so much fun.
That's fun. The 5 is a harder question because to fit my 5, I say, hey, if you had 5 minutes with anyone in history where you could sit down and have a conversation, and your answer is going to be, I'd love to have a whole day or I'd love to have longer. But behind the premise of if I had 5 minutes with anyone and I could sit down and just have a one-on-one impactful conversation in 5 minutes, who would that be for you?
That is a hard question because there's so many. I'll stay in the coaching realm. I would say John Wooden for me. I just there's so many of his teachings and so many things that I have heard him say, anecdotes and quotes, seen him speak, read his books. I would love or would have loved 5 minutes with who I would say is the greatest transformational coach that has ever existed, John Wooden.
The coach's coach.
Incredible.
And you think you've heard it all, and I've read a lot of John Wooden stuff over the years, and I read something even this past month where it talked about how he used an entire practice session discussing socks and the kind of socks you bought and how to put them on and the why behind it. And I thought, well,
amazing.
I thought I'd gotten better as a coach, and it turns out I'm not.
Well,
and,
details and excellence, habits, and he didn't want to blister on your foot. It may prohibit you from being at your best. So we're going to teach you even how to put on your socks and shoes.
Great list, great choice. And you're right. First off, the 5 minutes isn't fair. And second, the list that we probably all have. We could do this again 6 months from now, and you go, hey, I've changed my mind. Now it's this person. And keep doing that. So we've mentioned the books. We mentioned a few other things that can find you. You're all over social media. So if they're tuning into the podcast today and they think, I want to hear more or see more of Drew Maddux, where all can they find you, Drew?
Yeah, so in X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, even YouTube with our trick shots that we've done over the years. A podcast, we had a partnership with Cumulus Media. You can hear hundreds of episodes of those. But pretty active on social media daily, and would love nothing more and be blessed to hear from anybody that hears this podcast. I will respond. I can promise you that. There's no doubt you'll get a response from me, and I would love to hear from you. So please reach out to me, interact with me, and check out our social media.
So, Drew, we're recording this podcast here between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's a busy time for you in the retail industry, so we certainly appreciate, honor your time, and are thankful. And we look forward to another day of you on the podcast, but we certainly thankful for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me, Greg. I was honored and super excited to see where this journey takes you as well. And so thanks for letting me have a front row seat and being a part of it.
Man, appreciate it, brother. Man, I hope you enjoyed our time today with Drew as much as I did. And I know you picked up some nuggets to apply immediately to your faith walk. He lives his life on mission each day to leave things better than he found it, and being intentional each day for that get-to experience. We hope that today's episode encouraged you in your faith and inspired you with a story of another leader, coach, or athlete. Like today's episode, push the link out on all of your social media platforms, and share the podcast with someone you know in order to encourage and inspire them. And join us again, as our next guest will be prepared to give the reason for the hope that's within them on the next episode of 315 Voices.